Before we dive into this interesting deliberation on land use transitions, I would like to take this opportunity to talk a little bit about Vasudha Foundation. We are a not-for-profit foundation working at both national and subnational levels to advance clean energy and climate action. We believe in evidence-based decision-making and develop practical and implementable solutions by engaging with a range of stakeholders, including policymakers, industry, and communities. We are active in multiple geographies, supporting net zero planning and implementations in states, namely Uttar Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Gujarat, Madhya Pradesh, amongst others. And Vasudha has been known for developing some of its critical data portals, namely India Climate and Energy Dashboard in conjunction with Niti Aayog, UP Solar Cities with UP NEDA, Kerala GHG portal with Kerala Department of Environment and Climate Change. This is a recent initiative where we are currently undertaking a knowledge generation series to mainstream discourse on just and equitable energy transitions in India. As part of this initiative, we are exploring various overarching and sectoral aspects to tackle one central question, and that is, what do people-centric approaches would look like for an equitable and inclusive energy transition in India? Today's webinar is extremely important because we delve into this critical topic of land use transitions and its profound impact on people, communities, and ecosystems. We believe this discussion is pertinent for understanding the complexities of energy transition and ultimately ensuring a just and equitable pathway for all. Now, coming over to the session context now, land resources in India are particularly faced with competing demands, be it from urbanization, infrastructure development, food production, energy needs, climate action, amongst others. Now, these competing demands, when we couple it and put a lens to preserve vital ecosystems and safeguard local communities, it creates a kind of complex landscape for undertaking a balanced approach that prioritizes not just people, but also economic growth and sustainability. There are many objectives that as a country, India, we need to meet. And this could be a better energy output, a better crop yield, a better compromise for land use competition, better for the farmer, or better for local acceptance, etc. So there are multiple objectives that we are trying to reach. But how do we do this? And what should be the possible pathways or strategies to meet these objectives? With this background, our goal today is to foster a meaningful dialogue and collectively explore three key objectives. One, the whole paradigm of land use transitions. I know it's complex, but we would make that attempt to understand this from whether it's from renewables to carbon sinks to agriculture or nature-based solutions. The ripple effects of how these land use transitions impact ecosystems, communities, and livelihood. And third, learn about effective land use practices, role of community and grassroots innovations, and further see the importance of ecosystem services into this whole segment. Now, to help us explore these objectives and identify these critical interventions, we are fortunate to have a diverse panel of experts with us today, which we will be introducing you to in just after our presentation. And they will bring their unique perspectives to shed light on the complexities and different parts of this transition. Without further ado, I would like to invite my colleague Mekhla, Assistant Manager of Climate, for a brief presentation on land use transitions in India. After this short presentation, we will dive into a panel discussion, followed by Q&A at the end. Over to you, Mekhla.
Thank you so much, Vrinda. Welcome, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar. So with this context setting presentation, I'd like to start off with the first slide on why land is important. So land and its related resources like soil, water, and biodiversity provide essential services to sustain livelihoods and economies. So we can divide this into 4 services: regulating services, provisioning services, supporting, and cultural services. In regulating services, we can see that the land is important for climate regulation and water purification, pollination, to name a few. The provisioning services are relating to provision of food, water, resources including wood, soil, fodder, medicines, and other things. Supporting services are relating to functioning of habitats like water and nutrient cycles, and this forming the basis of ecosystems, and that in essence supports our lives as well. Cultural services are non material in nature, and they provide benefits like recreation or aesthetic values, and also sustaining traditional knowledge systems as well. So, land is a very important part of our lives, and it is estimated that one third of land's potential is currently being used for provisioning services. Next slide, please. If we come to look at the Indian context, India makes up a total of 2.4% of the world's land area and supports a whopping 18% of the world's population. So population has been increasing over the decades in India, and it has been noted that there has been a decline in availability of land from 0.89 hectares in 1951 to 0.27 hectares in 2011. The per capita availability of agricultural land has also decreased, is also lower than the global number of 0.29 hectares, whereas India's number is only at 0.21 hectares. So, given this context, this underscores the importance of land and meeting growing demands for food, fodder, timber, and energy. Additionally, we have to note that while developmental needs are being met, India also has ambitious climate goals, which will also require land in terms of whether we are looking at renewable energy expansion, creating carbon sinks, or any adaptation activities. Next slide, please. So the giving an overview of the land cover scenario in India. So the majority of land use share in India is in agriculture, which is also evident from the fact that 54% of India's population is dependent on agriculture and its allied services for its livelihoods. Forest makes up the second category, which has increased from the 1985 to the 2018 period from 20 to 22%. And the built up area has also significantly increased during this period from 34,000 square kilometers to 122,000 square kilometers. So these numbers are, while maybe only till 2015 are the official numbers that are available from government sources in India. Next slide, please. If you look at emission removal scenario in India in terms of the land use sector, we look at land use and forestry, and it can be noted that the sector is significant in terms of removals. And the graph shows us that while sequestration potential for forests has not been uniform, this sector is very important to be considered as we go forward to meet developmental needs and also meet India's climate goals. Next slide, please. So for the purpose of this webinar, given the vastness of the land sector and its various uses and the transitions that are happening over the decades in this sector, we have chosen to look at three components over here: renewable energy expansion, agriculture, and nature-based solutions. These three components have only been chosen to serve as examples to enhance this dialogue on land use and land use transitions and its interconnectedness with people and ecosystems. And it has also been chosen that for the main reason that it is central to the discourse of India's development and climate goals. So while these transitions are happening, these three components only represent a small facet of the impeding transitions that India is going to witness in the land sector. So we look at what are the potential impacts within these components. The first being renewable energy, where the potential impacts vary from land requirements to livelihoods to the potential impacts on biodiversity, food security, and resources. So it is. There have been studies that have estimated that large tracts of land will be required to ensure that renewable energy goals are met, not just in India but at a global level. On an average, we require 3 to 5 acres of land per megawatt for solar installations. And approximately at the moment, 81% of India's solar capacity is made up of ground mounted solar installations. So this puts certain pressure and potential pressure on the resources where the solar installations are also being set up. For example, large quantities of water will be required to ensure that the solar panels are clean and are serviceable. The potential impacts also come on ecosystems and biodiversity, where it is possible that biodiversity of a region will be affected or displaced during the installation process. Coming to the agriculture sector, uh, we know that the need for food and agricultural land is only going to increase, given such a large population of India is dependent on agriculture, and also the fact that the population continues to grow. So in the face of additionally, in the face of climate risks, there is a need to move to more sustainable agricultural practices, and this is also sort of a push that we see that's coming from the government itself, given that the latest union budget referred to natural farming and its impetus to you know uh, its impetus to increase the number of people practicing natural farming. So, what could be the potential impacts of such transitions that occur inland for the agriculture sector is one being cost and yields. While the initial investments for any sustainable or natural farming practices may be low, the productivity or yield, the yield in the initial years might be low, which could potentially put farmers switching to these practices at risk. And the second facet that we need to consider here is the access to markets and market linkages to, because the even if farmers switch to sustainable or natural farming practices, they might not have ready access to markets, which could lead to reduced demands, leading again to financial risk for the farmers. The third facet that we are talking about today is nature-based solutions. And as we all know, that India's third quantifiable NDC target is on carbon sequestration and sinks, and this will require conservation and protection of various ecosystems like forests, grasslands, wetlands, etc. Carbon sequestration can also be carried out through protection of existing forests and increasing forest cover. And studies and government numbers have also established that a large number of people in India are dependent on forest and forest produce for their livelihoods. So, if you look at the potential impacts of nature based solutions in general over here, it could be that to uh, uh, communities who are dependent on these forests may be displaced in while carrying out conservation activities, or people might be restricted to forest, and they might not be able to access forest produce, which could lead to loss of livelihoods. Or it could be that certain practices may be suboptimal or maladaptive, which is detrimental not only to the people living in the area and communities living in the area, but also in terms of ecosystem balance and the health of the ecosystem itself. So, as we can see through these three components, that the people and ecosystems are at the heart of these transitions. These transitions are so varied and vast, and because of the nature of the sector itself, they will have to be context specific to ensure that people are at the heart of it, to ensure an inclusive and fair transition process. Next slide, please. So what we are proposing is a sort of 4 C's approach to this problem. While this may not capture all the issues that are there, because certain solutions should be context specific, we start with data collection, collecting data and employing tools to build comprehensive understanding of socioeconomic dependencies of people on various ecosystems is absolutely crucial if we are to ensure a just and fair transition in the land use sector. So mapping locations, extent and status of ecosystems with carbon sequestration potentials, with taking in inputs from existing information can be helpful. Collecting primary data on various social and physical parameters to understand local realities is absolutely paramount. Mapping relevant stakeholders who would directly or indirectly be affected by this transition is also important. And to achieve this, we could possibly use existing tools like the SiteRide tool, the Restoration Opportunities Assessment methodology, or the Common Land Mapping tool that can potentially aid in responsibly managing and planning for these transitions. The second C that we're talking about is catalyzing socioeconomic assessments. The data collected should be further strengthened to capture social and economic realities. So it will be imperative to carry out these sort of SEAs to ensure an inclusive transition. The third C is community engagement, enhancing community engagement, improving community consultations with which are targeted and which will enable informed decision making, and also looking at bridging the gap between information that is available to the communities on existing schemes and programs that might be beneficial to them, and also recognizing that traditional knowledge is absolutely important for such transitions to happen, because they are rooted in ground realities and can be context specific. Another important aspect would be to look at incentivizing stakeholders with additional livelihood or economic benefits that can sort of support the stakeholders through the transition. And lastly, the last facet of enhancing community engagement would, the most important facet I would say, would be to work with CSOs and grassroots organizations who are sort of uniquely equipped to understand not only the local context, but also maybe to aid in bridging the gap between the community, government, or any other relevant stakeholder during these transitions. The fourth C that we talk about is developing capacities, upskilling or training of people who might be potentially affected. For example, looking at upskilling and training based on opportunity and interests. Particularly for small and marginal farmers who would need the support and training to get through these transitions. Empowering communities through financial literacy would also enable effective and equal negotiations for both parties to ensure that to ensure a fair and inclusive transition. So the 4 C's that I mentioned will definitely require coordination and collaboration of all stakeholders across levels of administration, which will obviously be geared towards enhancing community participation and aid in knowledge sharing. I would like to stop here and end my presentation that what I have presented right now may just be one of the approaches that we can take to ensuring a fair and inclusive transition for all in the land sector. But what we need to look at is listen to our esteemed panelists to talk about their experiences on how uh, how engaging with communities on levels will be beneficial not only to communities but also to ensuring that ecosystems are also conserved and protected. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mekla, for this insightful presentation. I think it gives a clear and presents a clear foundation for our next segment and the most awaited segment, which is the panel discussion. And I will now hand it over to my colleague, Rini, Associate Director, Climate, to steer us through the panel discussion. Thank you. Over to you, Rini.
Thank you, Vrinda and Mekla. And thank you, everyone, for joining us, the panelists and the participants. On behalf of Vasudha Foundation, I once again welcome all of you. And moving forward, we bring to you a distinguished panel of speakers who have worked on a wide range of aspects related to land use change, agriculture, forestry, and directly with the communities too. I'm pleased to welcome our esteemed panelists. As you would be already knowing, the panelists of the day are Dr. Abhi Tamim Wanat, Senior Fellow and Director, Center for Policy Design, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment, Professor Madhu Verma-ji, Senior Economic Advisor at IORA Ecological Solutions, Dr. Saksham Nijhavan, sorry, Saksham, if I kind of mispronounced that. He's the lead for the energy transition at Forum for the Future. Ms. Nivedita Mani, she's secretary and leading the research and communication at Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group. And Dr. Murad Ali, Senior Program Manager, as well as Dean for the Foundation for Ecological Security. So just quick things before we start the panel discussion. So the idea is that we will have two rounds of responses from our panelists. The first round will have a few set of questions, and I'd request all the panelists to dedicate something like 5 to 6 minutes. And then we will come back to each one of them again for second round of questions if time allows. And that's how we are setting this up. Sorry, I think just allow me one second. Oh. Yeah, and this will be followed up with question and answers from the, basically the questions from the participants. We'll open the floor for others to ask questions to our esteemed panelists. And I'd like to begin the discussion by, directing my questions to Dr. Abhi Tamim and just giving very brief introduction about him. Although I do know that a lot of people have already read a lot of his work. So he's an ecologist by training and has a PhD in wildlife science from University of Missouri, USA. A very well-published author with over 100 papers, book chapters, and articles across a diverse range of topics. Currently, he works closely on the science policy practice interface in ATRI's key area of expertise in land conservation, restoration, livelihoods, and human well-being. So Abhi, it'll be great to hear a quick overview on land use change in India from you, particularly highlighting the competing land uses. And if you can, kind of guide us through like what you think is a well-balanced land use, especially in the light of growing population and development needs. I would just like to add one more thing. There's something that Abhi and his team are working on, which is known as the open natural ecosystems. And it's an excellent concept on how these ecosystems can help sequester more than forest. And if you have time, Abhi, if you can also talk about it for 30 seconds, the significance of this in light of, NDC's target on carbon sequestration and the symbiotic relationship that once the open natural ecosystems have with community. So over to you, Abhi.
Thank you so much, Rini, for having me on this panel. It's really real pleasure to be here with all the other experts. So the question that you first asked me about, what is a balanced or what does land use change look like in India is a complex question. Obviously, the way we use land has changed over the last 50 years or so. especially in the last 50 years, the rate at which land use change has accelerated greatly. The number one cause of land use change in India continues to be agriculture. So most of our land is devoted to agriculture. Something like 60% of arable land is devoted to agriculture. And even all the other kinds of lands that we have are then also devoted to some form of food production, even if it's not, or cash crop production. So we have a very, we are an agrarian society, largely. And although there's been a great effort to move us away from an agrarian society to one that's more service oriented or production oriented, the truth is that we're still largely rural, we're still largely agrarian. And land continues to be the single greatest asset for most rural folks. So when it comes to the use of land and the management of land, this is where we really need to give a huge amount of thought, especially in the context of climate change, in the context of the various pressures that we put on land and what we can obtain from it, what we can put into it, and what is the value that we derive from it. So I'll give you a couple of examples. Most of our food production, the majority of it comes from a few states. And I won't go too much into that. Obviously we have the states of Haryana and Punjab and UP and the rice growing states in the south. But a majority of our agricultural land is actually is under rain-fed agriculture. And that only plays somewhat of a low role in food security. The ICAR, which is the Indian Council for Agricultural Research, estimates that about 30% of India's lands, agricultural land soils, are degraded. In fact, the MOEFCC has also recently come up with a land degradation atlas of India, which presents a similar picture. So our use and stewardship and management of land in India has not seen the best practices, especially since the Green Revolution. We've seen a degradation of traditional forms of agriculture. We have seen a very high dependence on groundwater extraction. We've seen a very high dependence on external fertilizer and pesticide input with a concomitant environmental and human health impact. The topic of this webinar is about energy transition and how it can be more people-based. And so I think this is really important because we are now looking to divert large amounts of land, as you know, the opening presentation alluded to. The renewable forms of energy actually require huge land footprint per megawatt hour of electricity produced, much higher than any other form of electricity production. So where will all this land come from? According to the government, this land is mostly coming from a category called the wastelands. Now, this category is something that's actually, it has an interesting historical background. The historical background being that when the British ruled over large parts of India or ruled over all of India, their primary interest in land was that it should either be timber producing or it should produce crops that would yield either food or other cash value. So any other land that was not in private hands producing value was then waste. And this goes back to the British philosopher John Locke's philosophy. And this really is where the concept of wasteland came about. Most of our common lands, grazing lands, non-forest lands then fell under this category of wastelands. And this is where most of our renewable energy infrastructure is planned to come up on. This is problematic for several reasons. It's problematic because it ignores the historical context of what these lands are. It's problematic because it ignores the ecological context of what these lands are. And it's problematic because it ignores the livelihood context that these lands produce. And so this is where we came up with, I've worked in the semi-arid landscapes of India for for the better part of my career. And having worked in other countries in Africa and in the US as well, in places in the US, I realized that these landscapes are savannas. These are grasslands, savanna grasslands. They are not degraded forests. They have the same floristic characteristics, the same floristic and biogeographical affinities as the savannas of Africa and other places. It's this misclassification, this British misclassification, that continues to plague these landscapes. So along with my colleague, Dr. M.D. Madhusudan, we decided to map these landscapes, and we created this omnibus classification, this nomenclature called open natural ecosystem, which included grasslands, savannas, scrublands, what are called forests, but actually savanna woodlands, many of our tropical dry savannas, deserts, rocky plateaus, and rocky outcrops and many other naturally open, naturally treeless systems. So we mapped this, and then we overlaid these over the Wastelands Atlas of India, which is a document produced by the Department of Land Resources from the Ministry of Rural Affairs, Rural Development. And we found that something like 70% of India's open natural ecosystems are classified as wastelands. And this is where the government's greatest focus is on converting to various other land uses, including renewable energy. So I want to just end here, and then maybe we can continue this in the next part. But I want to just end here with saying, and you mentioned there's no carbon sequestration. So these landscapes are actually vitally important for meeting our carbon sequestration goals. Because one of the factors that we talk about, or one of the factors that's ignored when talking about carbon sequestration, obviously we need land. If you want to grow trees, if you want to plant, you want to capture carbon by planting trees, you need land. But the other thing you need is water. There is a trade-off between carbon sequestration and water requirements. Trees require a lot of water to grow. Most of the semi-arid, the central parts of peninsular India are dry, they're semi-arid, and they don't naturally support forests. So you can plant trees all you like there, but you are not going to achieve any significant tree growth. It's these lands which are already sequestering significant amounts of carbon below ground, more or less the same amount below ground as forests do, but at a quarter or a fraction of the water requirement that forests do. So these lands are vitally important for meeting our climate change goals. So I want to end here. We'll also then talk about the people-centric part in the second half, and I'll I'm sure the others also have some more to add on this. Thanks.
Wow, thank you so much, Abhi. This was very, very helpful in setting the context. And I think with this, I'd like to move forward and now direct my questions to Professor Madhu Verma ji. Professor Verma needs no introduction, an extremely well-known academician with over 40 plus years of experience, and who has nurtured and guided students at both the Indian Institute of Forest Management and Bhopal University. She has worked and collaborated with premier universities and multilateral institutes, and has worked on forests, mountains, rivers, wetlands, and wildlife conservation. Prior to IORA, she was working as chief economist at the World Resources Institute. Madam, for you, I'll quickly club two questions because I think we are running a little late, and I would also request all the panelists to keep it to 5 minutes or maximum 6 minutes in the first round. So from your rich experience, can you quickly walk us through the impact that land-based and nature-based solutions play in effective climate action? That's one. And the kind of work that you have done over the years, could you also tell us that how land and forest conservation initiatives like RED Plus can be more effective if these were people-centric, if these are are people-centric? So if you can quote some examples, that will be great, ma'am. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for having me to this very interesting discussion. It's more of a learning experience for me than contributing to it. But yeah, surely I would say if somebody asked me what you have been doing in your career, I said I've been working on nature-based solutions all my life. So I worked across, you rightly mentioned, about forests, wetlands, mountains, rivers, and I worked on tiger habitats, snow leopard habitats, and So this is how, this has come out. And of course, since we have been given a lot of targets to achieve in terms of climate change mitigation and adaptation. And of course, there's a huge urgency of handling this situation, because the climate crisis demands immediate and impactful action. And we need solutions which are both effective and sustainable. That's what you were also trying to, portray. Well, when we put ecosystem in the center, it becomes, or nature in the center, it becomes nature-centric and a kind of an approach, or we provide nature-based solutions, which are, I'm an economist, I would say they are much more cost-effective. They're much more, sort of, they are less sort of risk involved as compared to many other engineering-based solutions, and they provide much larger benefits. And the idea here is, when we are trying to handle the issue of climate change through various interventions, like, for example, we have a whole toolkit available in case of nature-based, land-based or nature-based solutions, which are land-based. First of all, if you look at the mitigation aspect of it, of course, we have got lots of targets, and we know how much the land-based activities or anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions come from land-based systems. Around 23% of the total anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions come from these land-based systems. And they also have huge power of, sequestering as well, or capturing these, impacts as well. And 29% of all anthropogenic emissions are also, that way are provided as a sink by the land-based systems. These emissions, are taken care of. So we basically categorize them into two: the mitigation approach, and there is the adaptation approach. If I look at the mitigation aspect of it, to address this particular issue, we have, first of all, starting with forest, reforestation and afforestation kind of activities. We are planting trees on degraded land, as being pointed out by my previous speaker. We talk a lot about wastelands, which may be waste because they're not being used, but waste is a great resource for us. In fact, as an economist, I would say, when we talk about waste management, management is basically to treat waste as a resource and create, impacts, or create benefits out of it. So definitely planting trees on degraded land acts as a carbon sink, absorbing carbon dioxide from atmosphere. There's a huge focus on sustainable agriculture. In my previous work, a big study we had done for agriculture in the country, how to double farmers' income by making certain interventions. And you also quoted example in the presentation that you made for the institution about sustainable agriculture, about natural farming, organic farming, a couple of such practices to be combined with sustainable livelihood, livestock management, and soil carbon sequestration. How to, because the crux of the entire problem in agriculture is that of soil. Save the soil. Soil is the soul of agriculture. If soil is gone, nothing can actually survive. So there's a huge sort of mission going on to, first of all, rejuvenate soil, bring back soil, and soil only can give you a huge amount of return when it is active. It is capable of producing, it has production function definitely available. We also talk about improved forest management, how we combine various practices that, we can reduce emissions from forests, reduce fires from forests, and increase carbon sinks, definitely. And we have a huge target in front of us, 33% of area to come under forest, and we have also got tree cover for that. So targets are huge, and in terms of we have to create natural sinks worth of 2 to 3 billion tons of carbon dioxide via climate solutions by 2030. We have bond challenge targets to restore 26 million hectares by 2030. We have national forest policy, as I said, of 88, talks about 33.33% area under forest and tree cover. We have pledged for net zero by 2070. So it is only by well-performing land-based mitigation activities we are able to achieve these, huge, very, very ambitious targets. Second category is that of adaptation. If something has already been done, damage being done, we can't do but to adapt, accept that. But adaptation also is a kind of a mechanism of which comes through nature-based solutions. Like, for example, coastal protection. Mangroves, if you are able to manage mangroves, able to maintain them, the natural buffers protect us from coastal erosion. We did a big study on Sundarbans. I worked on tigers of Sundarbans recently about the, in terms of protecting the entire ecosystem, how it helps the communities, how it helps the ecosystem itself, saving them from storm surge and from sea level rise. Similarly, I worked a lot on wetlands, and we know how Water management can be done by restoring wetlands, managing wetlands to improve water quality. The natural filters, their natural storage function exists with them, and enhances the drought resilience as well. And soil conservation definitely, as I said, and there is a major factor in this adaptation. Practices like terrace farming, contour farming, which prevents soil erosion, improves soil quality and fertility, is crucial to food security and changing climate. I mean, you talked about various kinds of ecosystem services in a presentation, and there's a huge connect of these ecosystem services to the well-being of the communities. And well-being is that of security, which talks about personal safety, secure resource access, talks about basic material for good life, which talks about adequate livelihoods, sufficient nutritious food, access to goods, health in terms of strength, your resilience, your availability of water and clean air, and ultimately good social relations. So this is how we connect with them. So we have lots of examples in India of joint forest management, mangrove restoration, like talked about the example of UNESCO heritage site in Sundarbans. Global examples are available in terms of Green Wall initiative for African Sahel, in terms of mangrove restoration in Indonesia. Like that, we are able to access to this issue. Regarding the RED Plus, which is specific, you talked about that. You also wanted me to respond to RED Plus. Of course, we require much more people-centric approach because it is reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation. And there's a huge connect between the ecosystem services or the benefits which it gets from forest connecting with the the livelihoods of populations. So we have to actually look at people-centric approach in terms of community ownership and control. But if you are able to have that, you provide them access. You have develop a sense of responsibility, belongingness of the people with the sector. Then definitely they will invest more. They will contribute more towards that. And also the having good benefit sharing mechanism. What we eventually talk about is a kind of payment for ecosystem services. If they're intervening or making intervention to contribute or to conserve an ecosystem. For example, a focus is climate change or sequestering carbon. Carbon is just first initiative, the first primer, but multiple benefits also flow out of it. So that's what they're invisible in the system, and that's what is our role, is to make them visible and try to compensate people for providing these services. I think I will stop here and then we'll come back into it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. This is very helpful. And I think we should probably sit with you like separately to understand all the, from the work that the rich experience that you bring. Next, I think I would like to reach out to Saksham here. Saksham currently at Forum for Future is leading the energy transition for India, and which also includes the Responsible Energy Initiative. His work revolves around renewable energy sector to adopt business models and value chains with justice, equity, universal rights, and resilient ecological systems at their core. So, Saksham, for climate action, what we'd like to understand from you is the nexus for the transition that each country has to undergo with the idea of just and people-centric transition. So, in that context, my question to you would be that what are the challenges that are associated with renewable energy expansion while India or overall globally we embark on approaches to make it people-centric. So we'd like to hear from you on that.
Thank you. And hi, everyone. So I am not a big data person, but some of the things that are quite simplistic sometimes in our understanding when we speak about land issues with renewable energy. There are studies that say India has 30% of India's land is classified as degraded land. And for renewable energy, we only need about 3% of India's land mass. So 3% and 30%, it's not going to be a problem. We can easily find 3% of that 30% degraded land and use that to meet our renewable energy goals, which ideally would be great, but that's not what is happening on ground. So I think the whole discussion here is on how do we make sure that renewable energy deployment happens at the pace and continues at the pace that we need it to, because decarbonization is incredibly important. Renewable energy plays a huge part in that. But also there is a risk that we might bring in historic practices that we've had from other industries, which are extractive in nature, unequitable in nature, to a new sector. and also a risk that this will actually slow down renewable energy implementation. So I think that's not what any of us want to see happen. So how do we approach it differently? I think that's really interesting to explore, as well as the new sector grows, as the new sector matures, and as we want to position India as one of the leaders in renewable deployment, along with dealing with aspects of building resilience and adaptive capacity of communities as well. So coming back to that challenge on 3% degraded land needed, 30% available, why is it not happening? We're seeing that one of the reasons why it's not happening is because transmission infrastructure doesn't exist where this degraded land exists. I'm not saying everywhere, but in most places. So it's much more expensive to create evacuation and transmission infrastructure in new areas, as opposed to just extending the transmission infrastructure by 1 mile, a few kilometers, towards where some land is available as well. Second, there isn't other available infrastructure in those spaces: roads, construction material, labor, and after that, post-construction labor, maintenance staff as well. So that's why it becomes even harder in practice to access that degraded land as well. And lastly, our understanding of degraded land is relatively simplistic. We've seen in a lot of places where the land is classified as government-owned or panchayat-owned or degraded actually has quite a lot of value to pastoralists, to local communities, or even as commons as well. We're seeing, it's quite simple. We're seeing here in monsoon everywhere that it's green everywhere, and that actually acts as grazing grounds for cattle, seasonally for pastoralists as well. So degraded land is not so degraded in a lot of spaces, and we're seeing that a lot in Rajasthan as well, actually. So how do we approach this in a more equitable manner? How do we approach this in a more people-centric manner? Well, one of the reasons we are talking about it here is that we are seeing conflicts come up specifically due to renewable energy installation and land procurement. We are seeing stories come up where communities are either saying that they were, the negotiations that were made were undervalued, and they realize later on that the value of the land is more, and they're receiving less for than what the market is ready to pay for. Happens due to different reasons. One of the reasons would be that it actually is that it was undervalued. It could be that the value of land rises quite steeply compared to what the gradual 5-6% increase in prices that the communities get locked in for longer term. Or it could be in quite a few cases that we're seeing that land aggregators or middlemen actually make false promises to communities. And when the developers show up, they realize that that's not what they agreed with. The land aggregators take their fee and run away. We're also seeing some of the conflicts coming up where some of the jobs that, again, are overpromised, that the number of jobs that will be created, number of women that will be employed, and that doesn't happen because renewable energy doesn't generate as many jobs as other traditional industries. I know, Rini, you want me to move on to some of the examples. So there are quite a few issues, but let's look at what are some of the global examples of what's happening and even what is happening here in India as well. I think one of the approaches to doing this is long-term community development planning upfront with the developers and with communities. So CSR is one way, but I think CSR is often approached as an afterthought, and more on, if we generate profits, we'll direct 2% of our profits towards some community development activities. And they often are piecemeal and project-led rather than long-term. So I think one of the ways to do it is thinking about local area development, community area development from a longer term. One of the ways we've seen this happen, few renewable energy developers are doing this, is not just looking at capacity building or training, but they actually, as the infrastructure is going up, it takes about 18 to 24 months to go up. They start training some of the local men and women in those skills and promise about 60 to 70% employment. They cannot do 100% because they know some people are not going to meet the quality of skills that they need. That's something that they start doing proactively. This is not CSR activity. Another bit that we have started seeing is that some of the developers are planning water conservation, water development, or rejuvenating the water table in local areas right from the project planning as well. So especially in sandy areas, dusty areas, there's more need for regular washing and cleaning of solar panels. So how is that washing and cleaning going to help rejuvenate local water table, or actually just maintain it? Because that's a huge task in itself as well. Globally, we are seeing some examples that are coming up on one of the hardest aspects of co-ownership. So in South Africa, there has been, in parts of South Africa, there is a mandatory community ownership aspect that is being implemented, where 2.5% of renewable energy power plant needs to be held by community shareholding. That's something that South Africa is planning. It's really hard. Even 2.5% sounds really low, but that's something that's happening in South Africa as well. We're seeing that in Argentina, utility scale solar companies actually planned on providing more sustainable and more resilient housing to indigenous communities with about 130 households. So that's something that got planned with the infrastructure, with the renewable energy infrastructure, not afterwards as well. There are quite a few examples on skills and livelihoods as well, on conservation, but I can stop here. I can speak about it in the questions because I know you might be running over time.
No, that's perfectly fine for now. And thank you so much. I mean, these examples on, capacity building of the community, and then also ensuring some of them get, get employment through these companies. That's an excellent example. I'll, in fact, put this down and keep this reserved for the next round if we get chance. And I'd like to discuss this with other speakers as well. And moving forward, I'll now turn towards Ms. Nivedita Maniji. She's currently the secretary and leading the research and communications at the Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group. Ms. Mani has extensive experience in leading and implementing projects on issues of sustainable livelihood, gender, ecosystems, water and sanitation, rural and urban climate change resilience, and disaster risk reduction. And Nivedita ji, we have had the opportunity to work together for the smallest governance unit in India, which is developing the Climate Smart Gram Panchayat Action Plan. So keeping that in the background and the work that you have done over the years for reducing climate risks, my first question to you for this round would be, what are some of the strategies that can be employed to enhance the livelihoods of vulnerable communities, which in the terms of the area where you have worked would be like the small and marginal farmers and women farmers. And before you begin, there's just one quick thing I want to announce. I'd request the participants to please post your questions in the quick Q&A session so that we are ready with that when the discussion is over. Over to you, Nivedita ji.
Thank you so much, Rini, and thanks for this wonderful opportunity to be part of this very esteemed panel on this webinar. A little bit about Gorakhpur Environmental Action Group. We are an NGO. We are in our 50th year of existence. Very soon we will be entering in 2025. And we have been working, as the name suggests, on environment and climate change related issues. And the main target group with which we work has always been small marginal farmers, and with a very prominent emphasis on women farmers. We also work in generally in the flood affected areas of Eastern UP, North Bihar areas, but we have also worked a bit on in the drought prone areas like the Bundelkhand district, Mahoba, and other places. When we talk about the small, marginal and women farmers, the vulnerabilities are very critical to be understood, actually. And we need to understand what are the local impacts of climate change on those vulnerable communities. And when we talk about vulnerability, it's not that if a farmer is small and marginal or a woman, he or she ultimately becomes vulnerable. But we need to understand this vulnerability in a very contextual manner. The vulnerability can be according to gender, it can be according to the socioeconomic class, it can be according to the spatial location where they are actually residing. For instance, in our part of the world, communities residing near the rivers are more vulnerable because they are more prone to floods and waterlogging situations. So their vulnerability ultimately goes high. So there are various parameters or various angles of looking at vulnerability. And once we understand this, as I said earlier, we work with small and marginal farmers and women farmers, and we try and see how we can make agriculture resilient so that their livelihoods can be enhanced and they can give good remuneration from their agriculture and farming systems. We work, there are two levels. I would take few minutes to explain this. One thing is that we work at 3 levels when we say we are doing climate resilient agriculture. The first one is that we do at the farm level, whatever interventions we are doing, which means the farm of the farmer, wherein we do a lot of sustainable agriculture practices, climate resilient agriculture practices are being promoted. We don't say organic, but then we do say that more use of bio inputs into the agriculture. So entire farm and its management is one of the key strategies that we try to work upon when we are dealing with small marginal women farmers. The second level is that we work at the ecosystem level. When we talk about where we talk about nature-based solutions, as Professor Verma was just mentioning, we talk about how we can using these natural ecosystems like the open and green areas or the water bodies, how these can be rejuvenated, these can be stored, because they have a very strong connect with the communities. Ecosystems and communities are very interlinked since age-old traditions, we all know that. And as Mekhla was also pointing out in her presentation, the 4 important ecosystem services that these ecosystems provide, they're very crucial for farming and for the livelihoods of these small marginal farmers. And the third level that we focus upon is at the extension level. That's one of the weakest, I would say, still in our country largely, and especially in our part of the world, wherein farmers do not have proper access to the information and extension mechanisms, and especially women farmers. We are also witnessing high migration from rural to urban areas. We all know this. We have seen in COVID times, we have seen otherwise as well, that how this out migration is happening in search of better opportunities, better livelihood options in small towns and cities, which is leading to actually feminization of agriculture. So at the back end, women are left and they are working as farm managers, and they have hardly any access to these kind of extension mechanisms. So how we can sort of customize extension training programs, capacity building programs, information exchange, especially for women farmers, so that they can get access to this whole knowledge and wisdom and improvise upon their agriculture. So these are the 3 levels wherein work as a strategy. Now, coming a little more down to climate resilient agriculture, in the next 1.5 minutes, I like to explain 3 key strategies that, Rini, you were asking me what strategies we are deploying. The first focus, our first focus is on reducing the input cost in agriculture. How we can lower the input cost in agriculture by how the input cost in agriculture is increasing with the use of high yielding varieties and chemical fertilizers and pesticides. But we try and see how we can lower this input cost by using more of bio inputs, by efficient irrigation mechanisms, and deploying other agricultural techniques also, so that we can somehow lower the input cost. The second strategy is to enhance the productivity. In one unit area of land, for instance, how we can maximize that every inch of that land so that the productivity and the production is increased. So, moving from monocropping systems to more of mixed cropping systems, to intercropping systems, crop rotation practices, and so on, which actually maximizes the resources that are available. So the idea is to enhance the resource efficiency and also maximize or enhance the productivity of that farm system. And at the third level, since we come from a flood affected area, we also try and see how we can work on reducing losses in agriculture. And when I say reducing losses, it's mostly because of the floods or the standing waterlogging, which continues for days together and months together, actually ruining the crops. So for that, we have certain strategies, like we do multi-tier or multi-layer farming systems are there. We do a lot of, we introduce a lot of flood resilient varieties in collaboration with the Krishi Vigyan Kendras or the agriculture universities. We do a lot of agriculture practices are being promoted, like jute bag farming or portable nurseries. And one of the most important things that we have always promoted is linking farmers with short-term SMS-based weather agro advisories actually, which can help them make timely and informed decision about agriculture, and they can sort of also save the cost and also reduce their losses. So some of these key strategies, I know the time is a bit of a constraint. I'll stop here for the next round of questions, Reni. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Nivedita ji. And I hope, these innovative ways that GAG and you are kind of working are further taken up and scaled up for ensuring, because India will go through this climate resilient, the land use and the agriculture patterns will change. So
Sure.
we hope that this is scaled up. And the last speaker, but certainly not the least, we bring to you Mr. Murad Ali ji, who is a renowned figure in the field of community initiatives of forest and natural resource management. Currently at the Foundation for Ecological Security in Chhattisgarh, he is the Dean and Senior Program Manager, looking after capacity building domain of forest-based livelihoods and community forest resources right program. Oh, he has over 25 years of experience in the sector, such as I mentioned, natural resource management, women's empowerment, and livelihood. So, because, we do know that you have worked in two very important states, Uttar Pradesh and Chhattisgarh, and also some part of your career you were also, associated in Rajasthan. These are like very different, have their own set of challenges. So what we'd like to understand from you, that while these development activities are ongoing and ensuring that there are people involved in all kind of changes, that a state or a region faces, what I'd like to understand from you, how some of the existing government schemes, be it the central or the state schemes and programs, can be leveraged to adopt or facilitate a people-first approach in farm and forestry sector. If you can talk about from your different state experiences.
Thank you. Thank you for giving me opportunity. As you state, presently I'm associated with Foundation for Ecological Security. And first, I would like to act which elaborated about the community-centric approach. Like the first is the Panchayati Raj Act system. Second is the Forest Right Act. In both, there are village level institution which, like in Panchayati Raj, there are already Gram Sabha and 3-tier system. And in Forest Right Act also, there are different type of approaches like Gram Sabha and Forest Right Committee for getting their forest title. After getting there are another committee formed like CFRMC. Then they for their planning of their land management. If we talking about a scheme, then in relation of there are various schemes like Manrega is the biggest scheme for the land restoration related planning, and about 350 million people depend on the common land. Common land means forest, pasture land, and other land which need to a lot of restoration activity, and community at own level they are trying to best to restore their forest, to conserve their forest, but a lot of finance involved for the lot of government support involved for the restoration related activities. So that if Manrega is the one of the, and second is the at village level, a lot of planning related activity related to soil water conservation structure can be included in labor budget as well as labor budget and in Manrega, and as well as Gram Panchayat Development GPDP. So two scheme integrated, and if we talking about NRLM side, so at village level, village poverty reduction plan also developed. So 3-4 segment village level planning can be integrated. If we talking about forest, so Pradhan Mantri also launched there like formalization of micro food processing enterprises. So that if we see in Chhattisgarh and other part of India, and tribal community and people dependent on forest dweller mostly take income from the NTFP. So there are a lot of pressure on forest because their livelihood depend on NTFP, and they also conserve their forests. So, and the NTFP benefit goes to trader and other part. So through with the support of Pradhan Mantri formulation of micro food processing enterprises, community can start secondary level processing. And if we're talking about what is the action point of how we can address this type of situation, so climate smart agriculture as well as in forestry, one of the way. Second is sustainable use of land planning, because if we see, suppose that there are three type of pressure. One is the climatic some degradation. Second is the energy transition. Second is the land pattern use of changing that affect already the agriculture and forestry sector. So there is need to diversification of agriculture sector and need to develop some kind of project form. Suppose that in 1 acre, how can benefit, how can community can take benefit. And second is there are a lot of social safety net which also need to government also run, but there is need to a kind of IEC and awareness at community level. So at FES we have developed some key mobile application in which community can get information of their social entitlement. There are also need to policy level coherence, because agriculture, forestry, and energy are taking their own path, but there is a need to some kind of coherence in the policy all sector for the present challenges. And also we need to some technology all extension services can be converted AI-based extension services, like already Meghdoot and various organizations doing some extension services, and weather postcard and other thing providing through their mobile application IVRS system. And for the community central approach, there are in every decision, every change pattern, every changes community decision taken first. And there is also need to multiple livelihood approach for the individual forest developer as well as farmer, so that they get their livelihood from multiple options. There is also need to approach integrated farming approaches, so that seed conservation as well as there is huge resources required for FPO, farmer producer association, for getting more benefit. So these are the key critical points, and in next round we will also.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much. This was very helpful. Because we are running very tight on the schedule, what I'd like to do is I'll pose 2 questions, and it will be great if we can hear from all of the speakers, like one by one, on these 2 things. Quickly, like a 2-minute input, 1.5, 2-minute input. So the questions that we want to understand from you, the 2 things that we want to understand from you, if you can think of 1 or 2 initiatives or interventions that can help expedite this transition in a just manner, what would those 2 be? And what do you think can be the role of philanthropies and civil society organizations in supporting these efforts where we have the transition, be it the land use transition or the overall transition for climate action? How do we make it like people-centric? So what role can philanthropies and CSOs work? Maybe I can start with Saksham, just 1.5, 2-minute input, and then we can go one by one.
So I think when he said a couple of solutions, one, I think exploring multiple land use with renewable energy, agri-PV is one. And I think there needs to be more research on what kind of business models, what kind of profitability, additional resources does agri-PV need, and then how can we scale it? I'm sure it cannot be scaled in every area, but how can we make sure we scale it? Along with what kind of safeguards we need to put in place. So it shouldn't just unlock all agricultural land towards renewable energy. So what might be the right places, ways to implement agri-PV? That's one. Second, I think the RE sector is mature enough to now become more conscious about its sustainability and how is it contributing to long-term development. I think we really need to go beyond the narrative on scale RE at all costs, or that RE is benign, but I think really understanding as a new sector is growing, what needs to happen to make sure it is actively contributing towards resilience, and looking at how does it build long-term community resilience, because most RE projects are going to be there for more than 25 years. So I think working closely with the industry and bringing these nuances is quite important. The role that philanthropies and CSOs can play, I think philanthropies in supporting these innovative business models. As much as we say renewable energy is mainstream, it's still harder to get capital towards renewable energy due to various reasons. I think where philanthropy can play a part is supporting some of these innovative business models, trying out new things. Even if we fail, supporting some of the innovations to fail as well. That's a role for philanthropy. And I think also supporting more work in building a deeper understanding of, how might land, energy, water, food nexus play out over the next 30, 40 years. Because as our energy needs are rising, our food needs are rising as well, and so are our development needs. So there's only that one piece of land that all different industries are going to need.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Next, I'd like to hear from Professor Verma. Ma'am, what do you think about these two aspects?
Well, I think the highly unexplored area in terms of, I wouldn't say exactly land-based mitigation, but it is land as well as, the coastal and the marine ecosystems. We have 7,100 kilometers of, a coastal protection system, which requires immense attention. And we had just taken an example of Sundarbans also in my previous statement. And also intensifying practices like organic farming, natural farming, because they are very cost effective. They do have a transition time, but they also not just provide, but they also build soil, and they have huge potential for future as well with them. But at the same time, you have really strengthened the entire value chain to establish these systems clearly and incentivize people who are engaged in this. In fact, we are engaged with the Niti Aayog to develop a toolkit for capturing benefits from ecosystem services, benefits from natural and organic farming. And as well as, of course, forest is one of the major sector which needs to be addressed greatly in terms of reforestation. So far as the sectors coming forward to support these, I think we are also doing a very big study on land-based mitigation in India, and we're documenting more than 80 cases and addressing 20 influential cases in great details. It's supported by philanthropies, and similarly, corporate sector has to play a very important role. And we do work closely with corporate sector in terms of climate finance, in terms of mitigation adaptation activities. I think these two have very important role to play in future, because the corporate sector draws a lot from nature. So it's a give back time is very, very strongly, and then they should come forward, not just talk about CSR, go beyond, talk about corporate environmental responsibility and climate responsibility to a great extent. I think that would be one of the ways. Yeah, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, ma'am. Abhi, your thoughts? You're on mute, I believe. You're still on mute.
Yeah, thanks. Saksham mentioned agrivoltaics, and I certainly concur with him. He also very rightly alluded in his opening remarks to the use of these lands by pastoralist communities. And I think one of the things we undervalue is the milk and meat economy that's that's provided by these large open natural ecosystems at very little input cost. This is important. It's, with the government spends almost no money in the for the kind of benefit, kind of value that the milk and meat economy generates from these ecosystems. So I think it's important for us to bring that valuation in. But we also need to, when we're thinking about putting up large RE installations, we also need to think of rite of passage for these communities who have traditionally been using these lands. Ideally, we should not be using open natural ecosystems for setting up a utility scale RE infrastructure, because I do believe, and in fact, somebody else also previously, I think Saksham said that I think there is enough land available for us to use, especially if you can work with marginal agricultural communities or marginal agricultural lands of this. But it's complex. I won't go into that as a solution, but work is required there, and that's potentially where we should have additional funding coming in, either from philanthropies or from other, or even from the government, to try and understand this better. But certainly one of the things that we do need to do is push RE to push the government to have RE also be subject to environmental and social impact assessments, because currently they're exempt from this. And because of that exemption, a lot of things tend to pass muster which would not have passed the sniff test. So that's definitely something that we should be looking to push for a little bit more. In terms of I think most of the other points have been made, so I won't belabor it right now. But I do believe that we need to be doing total cost accounting for all of these lands. We can't just value one thing over the other without truly and fully understanding both the input and output costs for all of these. So it's not just economics; it's also cultural value, it's inherent societal value, plus ecological and biodiversity value. So all of these need to be brought in for while we examine any piece of land for any use. The last thing I want to say is that the government does have a grey infrastructure policy for RE, the rooftop solar policy, and I think that's something that we're really missing out on, because that sort of solves some of the problems of the advantage of RE is that it can be decentralized. And a lot of India is suitable for RE because it cuts down on transmission costs and the associated transmission infrastructure if you can do localized RE. So the costs work out. We're doing some modeling on this. Hopefully, we'll have some of those results out soon. But yeah, that's sort of my 2 cents on this. Thanks.
Perfect. Those 2 cents are very useful, Abhi. Before we move on to Murad Ali ji, there's just one more thing I want to remind the participants. If you have questions, please put it in the Q&A, that box. We have received some questions, especially from Sarthak, and I think those have already been answered, but I'd also encourage participants to add their questions here. Murad Ali ji, I know that you have already spoken about, you're bringing your experiences from the state and how schemes can help strengthen this entire process. But if you can probably give one more intervention around this, and what do you think, because your organization is already working, so what kind of activities the CSOs can take and how philanthropies can support?
In my view, there are 3 types of activity which immediate need. One is the capacity building intervention at the scale, because a lot of changing in the knowledge system, changing in the new technologies, like if the smart agriculture sector, forestry sector, energy transition. So we need to some kind of capacity building intervention at scale, which are some like digital literacy type of system, some automated module which community can access easily, and there is need of the capacity building intervention at the scale, so that it also cost effectively, And second one is a lot of water body exist in India, and their restoration is very important for the mitigation and mitigation point of view, as well as if we see all type of data capture from the community and some external person enter the data. So there is need to develop a system in which community enter the data. Community means community cadre or community institution, as well as they also access their data and use their data as village level planning. At present, there is no such system developed, and in all type of data need to integrate in mobile based system in which community can enter the data, access the data, and use their data at planning level. A lot of technological intervention, including blockchain technology, required at this moment, and and philanthropy and funding agency need to address uh, some uh, some kind of like what type of challenges emerging, and there are multiple startup growing up. So there is a need to integration of the startup who address the environmental related as issues. So there are a lot of related to one side idea, and second type some type of support required to address their idea.
Perfect. Thank you so much. That is helpful. Nivedita ji, I saved you for the last because in addition to these two things, I have one more question for you. So of course, I'd like to touch. I would want you to touch upon these two things about what the role CSOs and philanthropies have and what initiatives can be taken. But one more thing that we'd like to hear from you, because the kind of work that GAG is doing is about the innovation. What kind of innovative practices at grassroots level do you think should be proposed and are already being adopted by CSOs or government institutions to ensure inclusive participatory approach? If you can also quickly talk about that.
Okay, thanks. Sure, Rini. So some of the points which I wanted to make, which is already covered by what Murad Ali ji was just sharing. Fully agreed on that capacity building is the crux. And when we talk about capacity building at scale, it's not just about the farmers, it's not just about the communities, but also the government departments, government
Yes.
officials at the state level, district, as well as at the sub-district level also. India has the best of policies and best of rules and regulations, as we all see. For instance, this whole guideline on natural farming itself. But then how much of it is trickling down till the lowest level, communities, how the communities are getting access to this kind of knowledge and information which is existing. That is a huge gap which we also feel. And the gap actually lies at the department level, who do not really have a fair understanding of how local climate change impacts are impacting the livelihoods of the farmers, and what needs to be done at the local level, in the local context, in the local agro-climatic setting, whichever that area is. So I think that's very important. The second, of course, is the restoration of ecosystems, the natural ecosystems, the water bodies, because that's also changing very fast. I am here sitting in Noida, and I know that my society is built on an encroached water body. I know this for sure. This was once upon a time, it was a water body which has been encroached, and there are societies and concretization of all this land area has happened. We are seeing how cities are facing increasingly floods, be it Chennai, be it Delhi, or be it any other city for that matter. So we need to understand that this kind of land use change need to be restricted. Proper policies are there, but they are not being implemented, not being sort of enforced strictly. That actually needs to be done so that the land use change can be restricted for good, and especially for these ecosystems, which also provide much of the nature-based solutions to all the climate-related problems. The third thing that was coming to my mind is we have been seeing, we are doing a lot of work on the ground. Basically, we work directly with the farmers, and we work in the rural as well as in the peri-urban areas. that how if we made that small piece of small land holding of a farmer remunerative enough in agriculture, they do not sell the land actually. We have seen this, we have done this practically on the ground. So we need to see how we can minimize the input cost in agriculture to enhance the overall net gains in agriculture, which can leave farmers with handsome income, and they do not sort of sell the land and they continue to practice. The land use doesn't get changed over a period of time. So these were a couple of things that was coming to my mind. And one more thing that before I answer Rini's last question is also this whole program around the Gram Panchayat development program that we are doing. GPDP plans are being made. But then we need to see these are excellent mechanisms, excellent vehicles for integrating climate change adaptation and disaster risk reduction. And there is full mechanism, a whole lot of strategy available there. Out there, which can help to sort of make development resilient at the Gram Panchayat level. So that also can be taken well into cognizance when we talk about protecting natural ecosystems and protecting the land use changes. Talking about the innovative practices on participatory inclusion, what we have been doing is that when we work with communities, we try and map the vulnerable communities and what their vulnerabilities are specifically to climate change. We engage them with a lot of participatory tools and exercises at the ground level. And whatever is created or whatever interventions are done, they are done according to their needs and priorities, which is also one of the mandate of the Gram Panchayat development plans, Rini, that we have been working together on. So that's very important, that taking local communities into the whole consideration process, co-creating technologies, co-creating resilient technologies and techniques with them at the ground level, and having that whole participatory inclusive approach that it serves the whole of society approach, adopting the whole of society approach. I think that has worked well with us. And that's one formula that we have been strongly following in almost all our projects at the grassroots level. So yeah, I will stop here. I know the time is precious. We have just 1 minute left. So over to you, Rini. Thank you.
Yeah, no, I'd also just quickly ask Meghla, Devina, and Vrinda if they have any questions. And then maybe we can wind up. I mean, Vrinda, over to you. There are a couple of questions that I can see in the Q&A.
Yeah.
I think Saksham has already answered something that was directed to him. There's one question, Nivedita ji, from, in fact, our team member Tejaswini, who was sitting in Bangalore, and we are trying to work on similar things in Tamil Nadu. I have, kind of answered to her, so that has gone in the answered thing, but if you can look through it and answer to Tejaswini's question. Any questions from the people who are leading this work, Vrinda, Meghla, Devina?
So, hi, Rini. Thank you. Thank you. There are a few questions pending, and I see one question in addition to the others, a recent one by Ms. Rekha, and where it's requesting to share some information on the work being done on the benefits of small-scale RE. Particularly from the land use point of view. So Abhijit, in case you want to, highlight some of that, I think that will be helpful. And apart from that, I just had one question, which I also put it in the chat box, and anyone can choose to answer that question, that we talk about these land use and how do we, strike a balance with, conservation of these ecosystems, and when we need land, when we need for a developing country like India. So what are the two best strategies that we need to adopt so that we do that economic growth is balancing some of these approaches? So that's my second question, requesting Abhijit to just give first responses to Rekha ji.
Yeah, very quickly, there's different applications for small scale RE versus large scale RE. The benefits of small scale RE is that there's the transmission losses that accrue due to utility scale, especially from far away, are avoided. Also, the large scale utilization of land is avoided. We're trying to model different scenarios of demand. Basically, we're doing demand side analysis to see if local, not just small scale, but local scale RE can replace utility scale RE for large power requiring installations such as industrial parks and so on, whether those landscapes can meet their own energy requirements rather than having to import it from utility scale power plants far away. So that work is ongoing, and hopefully within the next month or so we should have that ready. But the other thing that I wanted to point out is that local communities who reside around large-scale RE plants, whether across India, very rarely benefit from the power that comes out from those plants. Most of them are often without electricity or have minimal electricity. This is across India. You can go to any village around a large-scale plant, and you'll probably find only a few street lights working, and most of the houses don't have electrification. So when it comes to these kinds of trade-offs or these kinds of sort of inequalities, these need to be addressed as well, because the cost is often borne by local communities, either in terms of loss to land, or in terms of without. I mean, Sakshi already mentioned about some of the other problems, the conflicts that arise because of mismatch in expectations. But yeah, some of these things need to be taken care of, and I do hope that as the sector matures, that this will happen. The second part of your question about a rationalization of land use, basically we do need to think about better utilization of our land resources. Currently, our lands, there's a lot of historical legacies in land utilization in India, in terms of both where crops are grown, what types of crops are grown, where water comes. We grow water guzzling crops in the driest of regions. So we then have to build dams and supply, like we're growing sugarcane in Gujarat and in Maharashtra. That's just it's not the best use of those scant resources. So it really requires us to rethink our land use policies. And if we start doing that, then we'll start rationalizing things that make both economics. Thing is that, unfortunately, if we started doing a proper accounting, we'll find that most of our land use does not make economic sense at the moment, the way it's being done. If we account for all the externalities. And this is something that needs to be done. So we do really need to reimagine what land use will look like 50 years from now, and rationalize it. Keep in mind that climate change is happening, is affecting us, and it's going to really upset the apple cart, so to speak.
Great. Thank you. I think this discussion was quite scintillating, and there was diverse perspectives. And I'm happy that I was able to learn so much on land use transitions and about how to include this in our narrative going on for inclusive energy transition going forward. And just to let you know, all of you, that we are also developing a short briefing paper, and maybe we'll take some of the findings and discussion elements from this and incorporate into the paper and share with the larger audience for wide consumption, and happy to receive your thoughts, discussions on this pertinent topic going forward. And please watch out this space more. We are intended to look at a range of other sectors, and a lot of more interesting discussions and debates are waiting for us as part of this program that we are doing. Thank you so much for the panelists who offered their extremely valuable time and thoughts on this important topic. We are really grateful.